November 2024. A Ukrainian field, a Leopard 2A6 burns, German engineering worth $8 million, destroyed by a $300 FPV drone. According to Oryx, by September 2024, Ukraine had lost 43 Leopard tanks. That's 20% of all 200 units delivered. Berlin sent 18 Leopard 2s to Kyiv. By the end of 2023, according to German Green Party politician Sebastian Schäfer, only a few were still operational. But now, let's rewind 80 years. June 13th, 1944, Villers-Bocage, Normandy, a single Tiger I tank, commanded by SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann, attacks a British column. In 15 minutes, he destroys 14 tanks, 15 armoured personnel carriers and 2 anti-tank guns. The British 7th Armoured Division, the legendary Desert Rats, is brought to a complete standstill by a single German tank. The question everyone should be asking isn't whether German tanks are good. That question was answered 80 years ago. The question is, what has changed? And the answer is more complicated than you think. Because here's the technical truth. No one is talking about. The Tiger I of 1944 and the Leopard 2A6 of 2024 share a direct technical lineage. Both carry Rheinmetall guns. Both represent German engineering philosophy at its peak, but one dominated its battlefield. The other is being systematically destroyed. Today I'll show you why. And the answer isn't where you expect it to be. Let's start with the technical facts of the Tiger. The 88mm KWK-36 L56 gun, a weapon developed from the legendary Flak 36. The same 88 that was feared by Allied troops like no other German weapon. The technical specifications were unprecedented for 1942. The armor-piercing shell 39 weighed 10.2 kilograms. Muzzle velocity 800 meters per second. The armor-piercing shell 40 was even more lethal. 7.3 kilograms. Muzzle velocity 930 meters per second. At 1,000 meters, it could penetrate 138 millimeters of armor. Compare that to what the Allies had. The American M4 Sherman. The 70mm gun could not penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor at any distance. To penetrate the side armor, the Sherman had to get within 100 meters, 100 meters. That's knife-fighting distance. The weapons testing report estimated that the Tiger's 88mm could penetrate the differential housing of a Sherman from 2,100 meters. The turret front from 1,800 meters. Read that again. The Tiger could kill a Sherman from over 2 kilometers away. The Sherman had to get within 100 meters just to have a chance. At Villers-Bocage, Wittmann exploited exactly this advantage. The British Cromwell tanks had similar armor to the Sherman, 76 millimeters frontally. The 88mm tore through them like paper. But here comes the first technical detail that most people overlook. It wasn't just the penetration power, it was the precision. The KWK-36 had a flat trajectory thanks to the high muzzle velocity and a Light's gun sight that was unrivaled for its time in British war tests. The gun achieved 5 consecutive hits on a target of 40 by 45 centimeters from a distance of 1,200 yards. That's almost 1,100 meters. 5 shots, 5 hits on a target smaller than a refrigerator. From over a kilometer away, and that was 1944. Now let's look at the Leopard 2A6, the Rheinmetall 120mm L55 smoothbore gun, a direct successor to German tank gun development. The same company, Rheinmetall, the same engineering philosophy. Maximum penetration power combined with extreme precision. The U.S. Army's M1 Abrams uses the same gun, by the way. The M256 is a licensed version of the Rheinmetall 120mm L44. American tanks have been firing German guns for over 40 years. Technically speaking, the Leopard 2A6 is superior to the Tiger in every measurable category. The 120 millimeters can penetrate modern Russian armor from 4 kilometers away. Fire control systems calculate ballistic solutions in milliseconds. Thermal targeting systems work day and night. But here's the brutal truth no one wants to hear. Technical superiority does not guarantee battlefield dominance. The Tiger. I also had weaknesses. Massive weaknesses. Reliability was catastrophic. Tiger units rarely went into battle at full strength because vehicles were constantly breaking down. It was rare for a Tiger unit to complete a road march without failures. The engine, the Maybach HL230, was underpowered for the tank's weight. The tracks were complicated. Maintenance was a nightmare. But still, the Tiger dominated its battlefield. Why? Because it was built for a specific war. And it was perfect for that war. World War II was a war of direct firepower, tank versus tank, gun versus armor. Whoever hits and penetrates first wins. In this paradigm, the Tiger was unbeatable. The 18mm could destroy any Allied tank from distances that were unattainable for the Allies. The thick frontal armor of 100mm could not be penetrated by most Allied weapons. A Tiger in a defensive position was practically invulnerable. Villers-Bocage was the perfect example. Wittmann positioned his Tiger so that he could fire down the length of the British column. The British were trapped on a road. They couldn't maneuver. They couldn't escape. They could only die. In 15 minutes, one man destroyed the offensive of an entire division. Historians describe the battle as one of the most astonishing single-handed actions in the history of tank warfare, as one of the most devastating single-handed actions of the war, as one of the most famous ambushes in British military history. But now, let's look at Ukraine 2024. The Leopard 2A6 is technically superior to the T-90M in almost all categories. The Rheinmetall 120mm has more penetration power than the Russian 125mm. The composite armor offers better protection than Russian reactive armor. The fire control system is more precise. Crew survivability is higher. According to Army recognition, the Leopard 2 has an estimated armor rating of 920 to 960 mm RHAE on the turret against kinetic projectiles. The T-90 has roughly 560 mm of protection, or 742 with ERA, explosive reactive armor. The Leopard should dominate, just like the Tiger dominated in 1944, but it doesn't. Why not? Because warfare has changed, fundamentally. The war in Ukraine isn't tank versus tank anymore. It's asymmetrical. $300 FPV drones are destroying tanks that cost millions. Minefields stretch for dozens of kilometers. Anti-tank missiles like the Javelin strike from above, where the armor is thinnest. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed in October 2024 that their forces had destroyed 6 Leopard 2 tanks with FPV drones in 4 months. 6 tanks with drones in 4 months. At Villers-Bocage, SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann destroyed 14 tanks in 15 minutes. The difference isn't the technology. The Tiger from 1944 would be just as vulnerable in the Ukrainian field in 2024 as the Leopard, probably even more vulnerable. Because it's slower and lacks modern defense systems, the difference is the battlefield itself. In 1944, the tank was the king of the battlefield. It defined what was possible. Infantry without tank support was lost. Tanks without air superiority could still operate. The logic of war revolved around armored vehicles. In 2024, the tank is just one tool among many, and maybe not even the most important one. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because the solution to the Leopard 2's problem in Ukraine comes from the same source as the Leopard itself, German engineering. And to understand that, we have to go back to a technology that was also stolen. Operation Paperclip, 1945. The Allies knew that German technology was superior. They knew it even during the war. The Tiger was just one example. There was the V-2 rocket, the Me-262 jet fighter, the Type 21 U-boats. German engineering was leading the way in almost every field. After the war, the largest technology transfer program in history began. Douglas O'Regan describes in his book, Taking Nazi Technology, how the Western Allies assembled teams of experts to comb through defeated Germany. They were searching for industrial secrets and the technical personnel who could explain them. Swarms of investigators raided Germany's factories and research facilities. They confiscated or copied all kinds of documents, from patent applications to factory production data. They interrogated, hired, and sometimes even kidnapped hundreds of scientists and engineers. Tank technology was a central target. The Tiger's armor was tested for years at Aberdeen Proving Ground. The Panther's torsion bar suspension was copied. The transmission from ZF Friedrichshafen was studied and replicated. And here's where things come full circle. The Leopard 2 isn't just a successor to the Tiger in a philosophical sense. It's a direct technical descendant. The Rheinmetall guns, the composite armor, which is based on German metallurgy principles, the transmission system. The German engineering philosophy hasn't changed. Maximum firepower, maximum precision, maximum armor. That philosophy made the Tiger unbeatable in 1944, and it makes the Leopard 2 one of the best tanks in the world. But the world has changed. And here we come to the real lesson of this story. The Tiger dominated because it was perfect for its war. The Leopard 2 is fighting in a war it wasn't built for. No tank was built for it. Drone warfare didn't even exist in this form 10 years ago. The irony is that the solution might again come from German engineers. Rheinmetall is already working on anti-drone defense systems for tanks. The new KF-51 Panther has improved sensors and active protection systems. The Leopard 2A8 generation, which Germany is buying for almost €3 billion, has the trophy active protection system from Rheinmetall. German technology, adapted to a new kind of war, just like 80 years ago, when German engineers turned the 80mm flak into the deadliest tank gun of the war. Now their successors are adapting the Leopard to a world where drones have changed the rules. But here's what history really teaches us. The Tiger, I wasn't dominant because it had the best technology. It was dominant because its technology was a perfect fit for its battlefield. The 80mm against thin Allied armor, the thick frontal armor against weak Allied guns, the precision against opponents who couldn't hide. The Leopard 2 is technically superior to the Tiger in every way. But technology alone doesn't win wars. Wittmann didn't win at Villers-Bocage just because of his tank. He won because he had the right tank, in the right place, at the right time, and because he knew how to use it. The Ukrainian crews driving Leopard 2s aren't worse soldiers than Wittmann. Their tanks aren't worse than the Tiger. They're just fighting a different war, a war in which a $300 drone can destroy an €8 million tank. And that's not a weakness of the Leopard. That's a change in warfare itself. But let's delve deeper into the technical evolution, because the connection between the Tiger and the Leopard isn't just philosophical. It's concrete and measurable. The Tiger's Krupp armor used a technique called face hardening. The outer layer was hardened through a process called carburization. Carbon was introduced to the steel surface. The result was armor that was exceptionally resistant to penetration. According to the O'Regan book, these techniques were systematically studied after the war, Aberdeen Proving Ground tested, captured Tigers for years. The findings went directly into the development of American and British armor. The Chobham composite armor used today in M1 Abrams and Leopard 2 tanks is based on principles derived from this research: multi-layered construction, varying hardness, energy distribution throughout the armor structure. The Tiger had interlocking plates. Armor plates that interlocked instead of just being welded. This technique distributed impact energy over a larger area. Modern composite armor uses the same principle on a molecular level. Remember the 900 mm RHA of the Leopard 2? That number is only possible because German metallurgists laid the groundwork 80 years ago. But the gun is perhaps the most striking example of technical continuity. Rheinmetall. The same company that built the 88mm K-36 for the Tiger. They still exist today, and they still build some of the best tank guns in the world. The 88mm had a muzzle velocity of 800 to 930 meters per second, depending on the ammunition. It could penetrate 138 millimeters of armor from 1 kilometer. The Rheinmetall 120mm L55 has a muzzle velocity of about 1,700 meters per second. It can penetrate over 800 millimeters ray. That's a doubling of the speed and a 6-fold increase in penetration power in 80 years. But the principle is the same: high velocity, heavy projectile, flat trajectory, precision through ballistic superiority. German engineering philosophy, unchanged since World War II. And here we come to something that most people don't know. The M1 Abrams, the American main battle tank, the backbone of the U.S. Armored Forces. Its main weapon is the M256, a licensed version of the Rheinmetall 120mm L44. American tanks, German guns. Not even the secret MBT-70 project of the 60s could find a better solution. The USA and West Germany worked together on a common tank. That project failed, but when both countries continued separately, they both built tanks with Rheinmetall guns. The Leopard 2, the M1 Abrams, both carry German DNA, and this DNA can be traced directly back to the Tiger. The Flak 36 that became the KWK-36, the KWK-36 that laid the foundation for all German tank gun development, the post-war research that refined these principles, and finally, the Rheinmetall 120mm that's now in almost every Western main battle tank. 80 years of continuous development based on principles established in World War II. But now, back to Ukraine. The T-90M that the Leopard 2 fights is, interestingly, also a product of German technology. Not directly, of course, but Soviet tank technology was massively influenced by German war booty. Operation Osoaviakim in October 1946 deported 2,200 German engineers to the Soviet Union. They worked on everything, from rockets to tanks. The T-54 torsion bar suspension was copied from the Panther. The transmission design was based on ZF principles. Even the bulletproof glass came from German research. The T-90M fighting the Leopard 2 today has German roots. Just like the Leopard itself. Two tanks with German DNA fighting against each other in a war dominated by drones. The irony is almost too perfect. But let's talk about the future. The Leopard 2A8, which Germany is buying for almost 3 billion euros, has significant upgrades. The Trophy Active Protection System can intercept incoming rockets and drones. Improved sensors detect threats earlier. The armor has been optimized against modern threats. Rheinmetall's new KF-51 Panther goes even further. It has a 130mm gun, the largest tank gun ever used in a Western main battle tank. It has autonomous drone defense. It can support infantry with integrated drone systems. German engineers are adapting, just like they adapted in 1942 when they turned the Flak 36 into a tank gun. just like they adapted in 1943 when they developed the Panther as a response to the T-34. Adaptation is the core of German engineering philosophy. The Tiger didn't dominate because it was unchangeable. It dominated because German engineers learned faster than their opponents. At Villers-Bocage, SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann didn't just use his tank. He used tactical knowledge that came from years of tank battles on the Eastern Front. The German tank troops had learned against Soviet tanks. They knew how to compensate for numerical inferiority through tactical superiority. The Tiger was the tool. Wittmann was the master who knew how to use it. In the Ukrainian field, this advantage is missing. The Ukrainian crews are well trained, but they're fighting an enemy that has changed the rules. FPV drones, loitering munitions, minefields that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. This isn't a tank battlefield anymore. This is a war of attrition where every exposed vehicle is a target. The best tank in the world is useless if it can't be deployed without being destroyed. But here is the crucial question. Is the tank obsolete? The answer is probably no. The Tiger, I wasn't the end of tank development either. It was a highlight of its time. After that came better tanks, faster tanks, tanks built for new battlefields. The Leopard 2 may be the end of an era. The era in which tanks could operate without active protection systems. The era in which firepower and armor alone were enough. The next generation will be different, with drone defense, with active protection systems, with networking to other units on the battlefield, maybe even with its own drones for reconnaissance and combat. And WHO will develop this technology. German engineers are already on it. The Kf-51 Panther, the Leopard 2A8, the next generation of Rheinmetall weapons systems, all integrating lessons from Ukraine. The same company that armed the Tiger is arming the future. That's perhaps the most important lesson of this story. Technical dominance isn't static. It must be constantly re-earned. The Tiger was dominant in 1944 because German engineers understood before everyone else what a heavy tank had to be able to do. The Leopard 2 is at risk today because the world has changed faster than tank development, but German engineers are already working on the solution. Remember the numbers? 88mm KWK-36, 138 millimeters of penetration from 1 kilometer, absolutely lethal for 1944. Rheinmetall 120mm 55, over 800 millimeters of penetration. Absolutely lethal for today. The next generation, maybe 130 meters or 140, with drone defense integrated, with sensors that detect threats before they arrive, with active protection systems that fend off every attack. The German engineering philosophy remains the same: maximum firepower, maximum precision, maximum survivability. Only the tools change. SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann probably wouldn't destroy 14 tanks in 15 minutes today. He would choose his target differently. Maybe he'd be controlling drones. Maybe it would coordinate a networked team of vehicles. But its understanding of the battlefield would be the same. Tactical superiority through technical excellence. That is the legacy of the Tiger. Not just a weapon, a philosophy. And that philosophy lives on in every Leopard, in every Abrams with a German gun, in every new system that Rheinmetall develops. If you appreciate this technical truth, then support this channel so we can continue to tell the story that others are keeping quiet. German engineering, from 1944 to today, unchanged in its excellence. Now, let's talk about something that's rarely mentioned. The cost. A Tiger. I cost approximately 250,000 Reichsmarks in 1944. That was equivalent to about 60 Sherman tanks. Germany could only build 1,347 Tiger I tanks. The US built almost 50,000 Shermans. The Leopard 2A6 cost around 8 million euros. A T-72 costs about $1 million. A T-90M about $4 million. The cost ratios have shifted, but the fundamental problem remains. German tanks are technically superior, but expensive. In Ukraine, this problem is brutally apparent. An FPV drone that costs $300 can destroy a tank that costs millions. The mathematical ratio is devastating. The Tiger had the same problem. It was too expensive for mass production. The Allies overwhelmed German tank forces through sheer numbers. Numerical superiority versus technical excellence. The theme repeats itself, but here is the crucial difference. In 1944, you couldn't achieve numerical superiority with cheap technology. You needed real tanks, real soldiers, real logistics. In 2024, you can use drones costing a few $100s to destroy assets worth millions. The asymmetry is extreme. This isn't the fault of the Leopard. This is a fundamental change in warfare. And German engineers understand this. The Kf-51 Panther doesn't just have a larger gun. It has integrated drone systems. It can launch its own reconnaissance drones. It can defend against incoming drones. It's built for a world where drones are ubiquitous. That is the next evolution, from Tiger to Leopard to Panther. Each generation learns from the previous one. Each generation adapts to new threats. Each generation carries German DNA. But let's get to the conclusion. 14 tanks in 15 minutes. That's SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann's legacy at Villers-Bocage. 43 Leopards lost in 2 years. That's the reality of Ukraine in 2024. Both numbers tell the same story. Tanks are only as good as the battlefield they're fighting on. The Tiger was perfect for 1944, a battlefield where firepower and armor decided everything. A battlefield where a single, well-positioned tank could destroy an entire column. The Leopard 2 is perfect for a battlefield that may no longer exist. A battlefield where tanks are the kings. A battlefield without drones. The future belongs to those who adapt. German engineers understood that 80 years ago. They understand it today, from the 80mm to the 120mm to the 130mm, from passive armor to composite armor to active protection systems, from individual fighters to networked combat systems. The evolution never stops, and that is perhaps the most important lesson. The Tiger didn't dominate because it was perfect. It had weaknesses, massive weaknesses. But it was built and deployed by people who understood what it could do. The Leopard 2 isn't endangered because it's bad. It's endangered because the world has changed, but German engineers are already working on the next generation. SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann died on August 8, 1944. When British gunners penetrated his Tiger, even the best tank is vulnerable. But his legacy lives on. In every modern tank that carries a Rheinmetall gun, in every composite armor based on German principles, in every tactical doctrine learned from German tank battles. From Villers-Bocage in 1944 to Ukraine in 2025, German engineering remains unmatched. It will adapt, it will learn, it will dominate the next generation, just like it always has. But before we close, one last technical comparison. The rate of fire. The Tiger could fire about 6 to 8 rounds per minute. The Leopard 2, with its autoloader and modern fire control system, can reach up to 10 rounds per minute. But more important than the rate of fire is the probability of a hit. The KWK-36 had a first shot hit probability of about 70% from normal combat distances with well-trained crews. The Leopard 2, with its computer-aided fire control system, achieves over 90%. Even while moving, even with moving targets. That is the real difference between 1944 and 2024. Not just the penetrating power, the precision, under all conditions. At Villers-Bocage, SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann could hit Because his targets were static. They were standing on a road. They weren't moving. They couldn't defend themselves. A Leopard 2 today can hit a moving target from 4 kilometers away, in the rain, at night, while traveling at 40 kilometers per hour itself. That's technical progress. 80 years of German engineering. But even that doesn't protect against a drone coming from above. The armor of the Leopard 2 is thinner on the top, as with almost all tanks. This was never a problem, because traditional threats came horizontally. Tank guns, missiles, everything was expected from the front or the side. Now threats come from above. Javelin missiles with top attack mode, FPV drones diving vertically, loitering munitions circling the battlefield, waiting. The Tiger didn't have this concern. In 1944, there were no weapons coming from above. Air raids were rare and imprecise. A tank only had to worry about what was in front of it. That is perhaps the biggest difference between the eras. In 1944, the battlefield was two-dimensional. Altitude hardly played a role. In 2024, the battlefield is three-dimensional. Threats come from every direction, from every altitude, at any time. The next generation of tanks must take that into account. That's why the KF-51 Panther has improved roof armor. The Leopard 2A8 has active protection systems that can intercept threats from above. German engineers have recognized the problem and are working on solutions, just as their predecessors in 1943 recognized the problem of the T-34 and developed the Panther. Adaptation isn't a weakness. It's the hallmark of true engineering excellence. Here's another number to make you think. The Tiger I weighed 57 tons. The Leopard 2A6 weighs 62 tons. The KF-51 Panther will weigh approximately 59 tons. In 80 years, the weight has barely changed. What has changed is what's packed into those tons. The Tiger was primarily steel, solid steel. Its armor was its weight. The Leopard 2 has composite armor, ceramics, multi-layered materials. It weighs similarly, but protects far better. This demonstrates how German engineering works. Not simply more of everything, but better solutions for the same problems. More protection at the same weight. More firepower with improved precision. More mobility with greater protection. That is evolution. Continuous improvement based on experience. And this evolution will continue. In 20 years, we might look back at the Leopard 2 the way we now look at the Tiger, as an outstanding product of its time, a milestone in engineering, but as the predecessor of something even better. The question isn't whether German tanks were or are the best. The question is, will they remain the best? And if history is any indicator, then the answer is yes. From the ATT Metami KWK-36 of the Tiger, to the 120mm of the Leopard, to the upcoming 130mm of the Panther. The lineage is unbroken. The philosophy is the same. Only the technology evolves. Rheinmetall has been around for 139 years. They built cannons for World War I, for World War II, for the Cold War, and for today. They will build cannons for tomorrow. And those cannons will carry the same DNA that made the Tiger so deadly at Villers-Bocage. German engineering, unbroken for generations. That is the true legacy. Not a single tank, not a single battle, but a continuous tradition of technical excellence that adapts to every new challenge. SS First Lieutenant Michael Wittmann would understand this. He would understand that his Tiger was just one link in a long chain, a link that learned from tanks before it and taught tanks after it. The Leopard 2 is another link. The KF-51 Panther will be the next. The chain will never break. Comment below. Tiger, 1944 versus Leopard 2024. Which was more important for its time? And what do you think will be the future of tank warfare? Drones or still armored vehicles? The debate is open.